Oh, damn.
Recording in
And I
progress.
stopped him.
Open.
Opening now, cool.
Excellent.
Good morning, folks. I think it's morning where you are.
Morning, morning.
Hi,
We're
Tracy.
coming.
Wet morning for most, I think, isn't it?
Hi, Craig. It's a nice
Craig?
chair you've got there. It looks like a gamer's chair or something.
Morning.
Oh, we've got a child on. It's good.
We've got a young one.
Bringing them in young, Craig. Tim, sorry. Is it
MRO
wet?
He's getting younger and younger all the time.
Is it rainy where everyone is? Apparently, Sydney's getting a downpour. No, Tracy, it's good. Whereabouts are you, Tracy?
So I'm in the Whitsunday area.
Oh, terrible
damn.
place. Terrible place.
It's a boomer
We're
day.
envious. We're envious.
It's a nice day there, is it?
I'm at work, so you know.
Welcome, folks.
All right, mute yourself.
We will be starting in a couple of minutes. We're just waiting for everyone to join us. Thank you for being here. We have a group that is coming to you from right around the world. We've got Tim, who is going to be your speaker, who's coming from Detroit. You've got me, who's coming to you from the UK, and then the rest of the team are in Sydney, I believe. Is that right? So welcome.
Very damp Sydney.
Hello
Everybody should
there.
bought the water wings by now.
Hello.
Hello. I don't know why my name appears as A98991, which is my employee number. So myself, Paulvin. I'm from Newcastle. I work for Orica. So
okay.
Yeah, good
Fantastic.
to see
Welcome.
everyone. Yeah. So I was typing a message, then I thought, okay, probably I'll unmute.
Just say it.
Yeah. Say it loud.
Yeah, put in the chat where you are, where you're coming from. That'd be good. It's always good to just see where people are coming from. So appreciate it.
Yeah.
Anthony in the background there. We're just Anthony Shun. He's probably got some Star Wars figures. I would guess just behind.
I don't think I've got anything new, unfortunately. No, nothing new. Sorry. I'll have to work harder.
We've got Jason Statham. I think we've got Jason Statham, the film star from Hollywood. Oh, sorry, no, it's my colleague Guy. He just looks like Jason Statham, doesn't he?
Timu Jason Statham, Ian, which you'll probably enjoy.
Say again, sorry, Guy.
Timu Jason Statham, not quite the same.
Timu version.
How are you, Tim?
Okay.
Good to see you.
Good. How you doing?
Good.
Rockhampton, East Coast. Flavio from Sydney, Arnott's group. Thanks, folks. Well, we're going to kick off now. Thanks for joining us. I think it is morning for most of you. And thanks for being here this Friday morning. We're right towards the end of the week. Hope you got some great planned. But the next 90 minutes you're going to really enjoy as well. So we're super pleased to have Tim McLean speaking to us all the way from Detroit on his 90-minute session entitled MRO Inventory Management Essentials. It's going to be very, very focused on achieving the optimal balance between reduction, cost control, and operational performance. It's going to be interactive. There's going to be loads of takeaways and outcomes and stuff that you'll be able to use straight away. So you're going to really enjoy it. For those of you who don't know Tim, I think you should get to know him because he's definitely good. Definitely have a beer with him. You might not get out at the bar, but you definitely will be able to have a beer. He's a self-professed MRO materials management tragic who actually began his career in the opposite side of the divide, in production planning. But once he experienced the problems and potential within the world of MRO, he's never looked back. He does live in Australia, but he is just traveling right now and is in the US. And we are very pleased to welcome him. So without further ado, I'll shut up and hand over to you, Tim. Over to you, my friend.
Okay. Thanks, Ian. I was thinking, Ian, we did one of these roundtable sessions and we had somebody that was on the treadmill. Do you remember that? It was one of the maintenance guys, and he was walking the whole time we're talking. It was kind of really off-putting.
David
Very
Peters, he walks.
exciting.
He's
Yeah.
walking around he's walking around Australia when he does his meetings, isn't he? It is
Yeah,
quite
he's
off-putting.
always walking.
Yeah, he never seems
Right.
to sweat though. Anyway, different
No.
story.
Probably because he's so fit. Okay, guys. So this 90-minute session can go quick or it can go slow. And what I mean by that is I always need participation. If you've ever been to one of my presentations, I'm constantly looking for conversation during the presentation and feedback and opinions and ideas. So that's how this is going to go. So with Mainstream, I have an MRO school course that I teach. And so I'm going to be pulling sections of that out. And I'm all very animated. You see, I use my hands a lot. And so we're going to talk around, I'll give you an intro first. I'll share my screen first. Let me get that going. But if I don't hear from somebody, don't be surprised if I'm going to call on you. But the only problem when I'm presenting, I might not be able to see names. Just realize that. Let me share this. Oh yeah, I can see you guys down the right side, so that's good. Okay, so this is based on the school that I give, and I'm just going to head down to the MRO overview section here, because this kind of gives an overview of how I view and see the MRO world. And when I talk about it, I'm talking about the entire supply chain. And where I start is always with the demand generation. I'm in Detroit now, but I'm working at a couple of utilities, which are very different. They're not nearly as cost focused. They're much more risk focused. But that's good because that really pushes everything over here on the left side is this demand generation. And that's where the risk comes from. So this helps define the stocking strategies, because when I talk about MRO, the main thing we're looking at is 1 is risk and 2 is cost. Utilities, much less on the cost. I mean, they're not going to be silly about what they stock, and they still have to do slob reviews and get rid of their inventory, but it's much, much more about risk. In other places, when I was in mining, it was both. It was a risk and a cost. And you can imagine when you're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars of inventory, it's a very different kettle of fish versus FMCG. If we have any of FMCG, smaller quantities, much more focus on cost along with risk. So on this left side again is this demand generation. So I spend a lot of time with maintenance, engineering, projects, reliability to what is the demand signal? How good is it or how bad is it? And it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, but it's not about finger pointing. It's just about understanding. If it's a bad signal, meaning it's very short, meaning if I need something, I'm going to tell you today. Well, then you're going to have to carry inventory or MRO materials in stock. If it's a very planned environment, and I've got some customers that are 80% planned, well, we're significantly reducing their inventory down because they only need to carry for the unplanned portion. And if you have calculators, typically you're looking at your total demand, so you're carrying a lot of excess inventory. So I spend a lot of time dealing with maintenance, looking at their work orders, looking at the reservations and how much time we've been given to deliver the materials. And that makes a very big difference into inventory and warehouse, which is that middle pillar. And what do you stock? Where do you stock? How much do you stock? What are your stock turns? Are you reviewing slob? All these things. And so I split the two because warehousing is much more about that physical piece. And I'll get into KPIs around stock accuracy. And the second piece is that inventory management, which is where I place the cataloging, the master data, the governance, the reorder points, the lead times, all these things is maintaining those effectively. And then that third pillar is supply. So this is where I put pretty much purchasing and procurement. And I'll speak more around purchasing is about automation of POs, linking it, if you're an SAP company, linking it through info records and contracts to make sure you're automating the purchase orders. Especially in MRO space, if you do the work up front, your ERP system like Pronto, Oracle, Fusion, and all these, they will automate. They're built to automate. We just have to feed it information. We need to be more data driven, and utilities typically aren't. I'm working in a utility in Connecticut right now. That's why I'm specifically here. And it was like walking into the 50s. I mean, it is unbelievable. Just to give you an example, they have 7 signatures up to vice president level just to do a bid for a material. Then they do the bid. Then they need the same 7 signatures to create the PO. I'm not kidding. Then the PO is created, and when you go to pay the invoice, they need another 7 signatures to pay the invoice. The red tape is unbelievable. So I've never seen that in Australia, so that's a nice thing. So you come in here, I'm a bit gobsmacked at the amount of red tape. So we're kind of opening their eyes and getting them to try to just use the environment they have. They've got to let go of this. I've got to sign a piece of paper before I can do it kind of environment. So those are the objectives of this. Depending on how your business operates around the risk is number one. By far the most important is the purpose of stocking an MRO material is to cover risk. The only reason it's in the warehouse is either one, I can't afford not to have it because if that machine or that equipment goes down, it is going to be way too expensive, so I will put it in the warehouse. Or two, it's so cheap, like nuts and bolts and gloves and glasses, it makes sense to buy enough for 3 months, and then you just stock them in bulk because the purchasing process is expensive. And I'll talk about that. Like the average PO, if you don't know what your POs cost, assume it costs you $100 to create a PO. And that's if you never touch it again. So we can talk about that a little bit more in terms of your cost of procurement, because I think people get surprised. We did this exercise in BHP. I probably mentioned a few times. It was probably now going back 10 years, but an automated purchase order that was created automatically, got receipted, and got paid without anybody touching it cost us $8.80. A manual PO that was created, wasn't expedited, was receipted and paid was $76 at the beginning. As soon as we started expediting, the cost of that PO went up to $350 and then on, depending on how many times you're expediting, or the price was wrong, so you got to get the warehouse to reverse the receipt, and then you change the price. It's amazing how much cost gets added to POs. And so that's part of the KPIs and some of the focus we'll talk on. And that's risk. And this is, I've already kind of touched on the cost. The cost piece is if you're going to have to carry something, well, we want to do it at the optimal cost. And this is where we find all the time people will set a reorder point because maintenance wanted 2 of these bearings on the shelf, and they put a max because they don't understand min-max, and they say, oh, if I'm going to stock 2, put 6 as the max. And then those things are never visited again until there's the oh shit moment. And then now we've run out. Why we only have 2, we should have 4 because we got 6 machines, and on and on and on. So this kind of world, especially with indirect materials. You have sorry?
I just crossed the road at Laurel and
Tito, did you have a question?
Angela, you're on.
No. Okay. Petito, I think if you got a question, speak up. If not, you might put on mute. There's some background noise there. Okay, so it's a good interruption, so I stopped talking. So this is, again, the focus is on risk and cost, understanding that at the very highest level, and then I put it into these 3 pillars so you get a good feel for where I'm talking from. Okay, before I go any farther, does anybody have any questions on that, or any concerns, or any thoughts, or any comments? No, if not, speak up if you can. We got Ian and these guys. Ian will let me know if there's anybody's holding their hand up because I can't see everybody.
Yeah, will do.
But let's move. Okay,
do,
so
Matt.
I'm going to get into these stocking decisions. And so this is what I've just touched on. So I'm going to get down to page 9. So for those that don't know, this document that I'm showing here, it's not the greatest way to present, but this is the document that I create for the MRO school that I give through Mainstream. So it's got all this information just not in a PowerPoint presentation kind of a form. Okay, so now this is where I want some feedback. So this is, again, getting into reservations and the demand signal. So as you guys know, if you're in the MRO world and your inventory management, that reservation is what triggers everything. And we don't do anything until there's a reservation. And that reservation, whether it's planned or unplanned, makes a big difference on how we need to react. So I want to kind of pause and ask a few questions. Who here measures the demand signal in any way, shape, or form? Are you looking at how many reservations that I'm receiving are planned? Are they unplanned? And I define the difference based on the number of days. Drew Troyer and I work together, and he says anything less than 14 days is an unplanned demand. Now that may vary depending on where you are, but he says 14 days. In my software, I do 7 days, and you can change that. But let me ask, does anybody measure the performance of the demand signal currently that's coming into their MRO supply chain? Anybody? No measuring, no
we do.
KPIs. Okay.
Yeah.
Who's we? Tracy.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
Tracy.
Yeah. So I'm with Wilmar Sugar and Renewables, and
Oh, good. Hey, Wilmar.
we do have metrics around reservations that are planned on work orders and reservations that are added to work orders after release.
Excellent. So now, I know you guys are on SAP, so that's good. So we can speak the same language. So what do you have a KPI or a metric, or are you monitoring it? Or are you actually measuring it to drive performance?
We actually incorporate it into our pick and pack metrics, which come out each week, and that's one of the pieces on that pick, along with a few other ones.
Okay.
But I'll have an interesting situation that I wouldn't mind getting people's opinions on later on once we've been through some of this with the challenge I've currently got. And I will preface this is that I sit in the engineering camp.
Okay.
So
that's good. So let's make sure we bring that back up, because engineering projects is specifically, that's where cataloging and the MRO, its life begins. That, when you do a new CapEx or OpEx project, that should be drawings done, handed over. Yeah. Catalog it. That goes into maintenance for criticality of equipment, flock build, equipment build, and then the materials build, and then what task list built off that, and criticality, all that. That's where it should begin. 9 times out of 10, it doesn't. But it'd be interesting what you say. So Tracy, on your reservations, so you're measuring it obviously from a pick pack and a warehouse perspective. Are you including maintenance in that performance review to say, hey guys, 60% of the demand or whatever it is unplanned, which means it's forcing us to stock more, which means more parts, which means more counting, which means more receipts, which means more people.
Yep.
Are they part of that conversation? Okay, what does that look like?
It's not a healthy conversation at the moment.
Okay, and that's a need. Yeah, that's always a tough one. It's a little bit of this. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else on the reservation? Because this is what triggers everything. It's it's important to understand this, because this is what will start dictating the stocking strategies that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And jump in, Tracy, if you have something else you want to say. No. Okay. So if you don't, this one of the core KPIs that we got KPIs to talk about that I put in, that I get businesses to measure, is what is the percentage of planned demand, and it's to highlight it. It isn't about pointing fingers; it's about reality. If it's 30% planned or 80% planned, that needs to be understood, because the more maintenance can get into a planning environment, cost is reduced everywhere, and risk. And so that's why we say, if you want me to reduce inventory, and often I see the warehouse and inventory team are held accountable to the working capital, to the cash. And I've never understood that, because maintenance dictate how much inventory should be in the warehouse. It has nothing to do with the warehouse. Their job is to receipt it, hold it, and issue it. If it doesn't move, we do slob reviews. That's back to maintenance, though. And that's why I like to build bombs, and we'll talk about that as well. So this planned versus unplanned, let me just go down a little bit here in terms of definition. So planned demand refers to the work or maintenance activities that are scheduled, anticipated, and intentionally planned. Now, one important piece that you'll see is you have a planned work order, and then maybe maintenance finds something that's broken or leaking or needs to be repaired. If they add that material onto the planned work order, the reservation and the requirement date are so short, that still is an unplanned demand. This is where the waters get a bit muddy, because you've got a planned maintenance work order, but you have unplanned demand added to it. So with SAP, I know you can split that out. And looking at the reservation date versus the requirement date. So you could say, wait, that's less than X number of days, so that's planned or unplanned. And that's the reason I suggest you do that, depending on the systems that you're on. If you guys can, just put into the comments, into the chat, which ERP you're using, because I know we'll have SAP in here for sure. I know we've got MEX based on the participants, but this is an important piece, is understanding that, because maintenance need to know this as well. It needs to be understood by them. It's like I said, it's not about pointing fingers, but they need to understand the performance from the supply chain perspective and vice versa. Hence why the KPIs. Okay, so this one takeaway right now is you need to understand what is your percentage of planned demand. This is critically important. Everywhere I go, I ask this and nobody measures it, because usually the warehouse are just their due is how high do I need to jump, and I just jump, and that's a bad position to be in. We need to work together. Any questions before I move on to past this? Because if nobody's measuring it, then I'm just going to profess that I think you should, but Tracy is doing it. Is anybody else measuring the demand signal in terms of setting stocking strategies, manning warehouses, inventory people, master data people, etc.? No? Anybody? Okay.
Yeah, just wanted to chip in. Not doing much of it, but for parts for more complex routine maintenance, when those jobs are the longer term plans are set up, that does trigger a cycle to order those particular parts. Or if they're a kit that goes out to be used, then that will also the use of that will then trigger the restocking of that particular kit. But it's only a small amount.
Okay. And this where this comes up again as well is when you have shutdowns or turnarounds, as I say over here, that where work has to be planned. And it's an interesting dynamic where you'll have a shutdown and you've got a different team doing it, where they have to plan these materials and when and how they're costed to separate conversation. But that's always an interesting piece, because how do you manage if I'm issuing materials to a shut potentially months in advance? How are you managing the restocking? Because as they're issued, and maybe they're issued out of stock to be kitted, to be set aside for that shutdown, and let's say in a month's time, if you run MRP automatically, well, then MRP is going to replenish those goods before you've even consumed them physically. And then you get a lot of returns, and then you end up with a lot of excess inventory. So that's another thing. If you deal with shutdowns and turnarounds, there are ways around that, especially in SAP, where you can actually pause their stock replenishment because of that. You're setting materials aside for 4, 6, 8 weeks or whatever it is. But thanks, Anthony, for that input. Okay, one thing that feeds heavily into the plan versus unplanned is criticality. So this is also a hot topic. Let me I know I got a page. Slide down to page 23. I talk a lot around criticality because it links right back where Tracy was talking, is engineering. And so I deal a lot with getting people to understand material criticality, because the reason I ask is, do you know the criticality of your materials? And if they do, usually far too many materials are critical. And 2, if they don't, this comes from maintenance. It has nothing to do with the MRO supply chain. This has to come from maintenance operations, reliability, and or engineering. They have to set the functional location / equipment, that's SAP speak, and what's the criticality and the priority, because that feeds straight into your materials. If you don't, people are doing this on a very ad hoc basis, and then you'll have far, far, far too many materials as critical. So I'd love to hear some feedback on how you manage criticality within your business currently, because this is it sets priority again for the warehouse. Because if you get your critical materials, the reason why I put a lot of effort and focus on this, because critical materials should be definitely stocked, and ideally you don't run out of these materials because they are truly critical. They're on a contract, the purchasing is automated, the suppliers, and you stock take them every month because they're critical. And you have a preservation plan in place for these materials. Who can say you do any of those things within your business? Because they're truly critical. If they're critical, This means it's going to stop your business for amount of risk and cost the business that you cannot afford. I've seen paper towels, I've seen paper cups, I've seen cable ties and O-rings, all classed as critical when they are definitely not. Doesn't mean you're not going to stock them, but they're not critical. So I'm going to
Hi,
start
team.
calling on.
Yeah, hi team. This is Paulvin again, A98991. So yeah, I'm currently working as a planner for Orica in our chemical manufacturing facility.
Yep.
Before planning, this is first time me as a maintenance planner. Prior to that, I used to be in the operational readiness side of things. So
Okay.
in that role, I used to work with projects, especially ensuring projects handover is pretty much done along with the maintenance strategies and making sure they hand over all the asset information so that we can build up the bombs and stuff. So in short, that's what my role was. So I joined Orica in 2021, so I cannot speak up of the many other projects, but the projects which we recently done, the process what we have followed is like we have a equipment criticality analysis tool, which is pretty much ask you 5 to 10 questions basically, which is not a software basis, probably made in Excel sheet. So where we have like a criticality score, high, low, medium, which says whether equipment is safety critical, whether it's critical for production, whether it's like a showstopper kind of thing, whether it's a whether it have a duty and standby kind of thing. So it will give you a criticality score, which is like we will finally get a B, C score, which is which is similar to what we have in SAP. So critical, if it's ABC, we use ABC indicator here. So if it's A, that means highly critical, B, function critical, C is like not critical. So from there, then we move like from the criticality analysis, then we'll move into FEMICA, then we'll find the failure modes, then we'll go identify the critical parts, then literally we'll then decide. We got a separate tool which evaluates the stock assessment, which will gives out the max min figure, like how much we need. Like it depends on, like again, it's like a pre-populated Excel sheet which will say what's the lead time, what's the cost, how critical it is, can we afford to keep it as non-stock kind of. There's X number of questions. Again, it will again give you a criticality score. So that's the process kind of we follow. But looking at being a planner now, looking at the bombs, the major issue what we see currently is that back in time after some of the upgrades or capex, the bombs are not updated. We don't have the right bombs, so the stock levels are wrong. We got a new equipment there, but the bombs is from 2020, 2000 or 1990, still reflecting the wrong parts and stuff, which is kind of a bit painful. Like no one has gone back and probably back in time, probably the MOC process were not that strict, probably. So we find the issues very frequently. So yeah, it's a step by step.
Where do you?
Once
you've done your ABC analysis, which is great, even if it's Excel, that's better than nothing. Most do nothing. So having that is fantastic. Are you loading that back into the MRP1 tab, the ABC indicator? Is that where you put that?
Yeah. So there is a field, I forgot where exactly, but there is a field for material, whether it says critical or non-critical in material.
There's
field,
a checkbox.
Checkbox.
There's a checkbox.
Yeah, so we click that checkbox eventually. Nothing much other than that is done. Yeah.
Because now that you're doing the analysis, making sure that, this goes to the data governance, is making sure you're putting it back into SAP, because I know you're on SAP, and you maintain that, because that's, inventory management in MRO is all about segmentation, is breaking everything into effective bits, and so that you can manage it effectively from a cost and risk perspective. So that sounds really good. Thanks for that. That's way better than nothing. What my next question would be, you'll have lots of materials. How and when do you apply it to a material? Every material, or Do you do it down to a certain value, or how do you apply the process?
So literally, I can speak from the projects level. Like we, first of all, listing the new equipments is the main thing. So we have a list of all the new list of motors, pumps, or transmitters, or the valves which get added into. So literally,
Yep.
we'll apply the same strategy for all the new assets. Literally, we like literally everything and everything. So we measure the criticality of every new assets, and we'll once we have the criticality score, we sits with the engineering team, say this is what we got, are you happy with it, do you want to
Yep.
revisit those, do you want to add something? So they will say, okay, this is good. Then back from that, then again goes back to the stock assessment tool. They review the max min figures, and if they say, oh, we got a that needs don't need to be stocked, we got that parts already here or something like that, so in short,
Yeah.
like it's the final decision comes from engineering. And to answer your questions, like literally we don't skip anything. We literally evaluate even though we know it's a non-critical process or assets, we still go to
Yep.
the individual assets which is newly added. So it's it's not like we pick and choose. It's more kind of,
Yeah.
we go through the P and ID, make sure all the assets are there in the list, and the criticality is evaluated for all the assets.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Muhammad, I see you got your hand up.
Yep. I just don't want to make this session as an Oracle session, so I'll just keep it a
Okay, your
short.
Oracle as well.
Yeah, I'll just keep it a short. So I'm from the engineering side. I have
Okay.
corrected for heaps of spares like during the last 4.5 year within Orica. So part of the problem was shift from legacy SAP towards to Fury. There
Yep.
we had transferred a lot of data, and a lot of things are messed up in that transition process. We're still working on that one. And literally speaking, the reason to get into this session is just to understand that if someone else within the peers here have faced a similar issue, like where the legacy system mugged up and you want to refix a larger number of assets, what sort of strategy you guys are opting in terms of fixing those large number of spares sitting in the store. Currently, a quick survey from our store manager reveals that we have somewhere around $380,000 spare sitting without any call during last 5 years. So, which is like a number to consider.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah.
in terms of to response to that the critical spare analysis process, I think Paulin has highlighted all the aspects that we normally go through for the new projects. Yes, we
Okay.
are opting all those procedures to make sure that all the min max are opted for the spares, and then we normally have every 3 year review strategy inside on site to seek that okay if there is any things to improve, but largely
Okay.
that is drive around from the RCA sessions, or if there is any bad actor coming up into our production
Yeah.
report system.
Okay. Well, that's good foundational process that you guys have. So that's really good, because I try to get companies to start with their critical assets first, because drive those materials, and they 100% should be in BOMs. Now, I'm a big BOM fan. Is all materials, especially if they're stocked in the warehouse, they should be in a BOM. That's the only reason they're in the store, unless they're consumables. So your M's and R's of MRO, 100%, if it's in the warehouse, it should be listed in a BOM. And there's, you can start baby steps on that. Don't think you got to stop and rebuild your whole business back into your ERP, but you should start at baby steps and start with your critical equipment, because critical materials need to be stocked, must be in a BOM, and I must have them sourced and should be in a contract because they're critical. If you start there, it sets the foundation for the rest. As you can see in these the stuff here is, you need to optimize the levels depending on if you get new equipment or less equipment. Is optimize them. Do you have a process to optimize? Orica does. Are you effectively at inventory management? The criticality, you're minimizing downtime, reducing costs, all these visibility and transparency. Where are these materials? They got to be very visible when maintenance requests them. They've got to be clear. They know the bin locations. They're preserved. I'm not sure if I have that in here, but that's a different section in here. Is preservation of critical materials is really, really important. Supplier allocation, supplier relationships, equipment reliability and safety, and life cycle. So this comes back to doing like slob reviews, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Is, you know, MRO, and in a lot of cases you don't ever use it. It goes in the warehouse and sits there for so many years, and then you decide to move it on because engineering has changed plant and upgraded, or for whatever reason. So I'll come back to that because slob reviews are another very important piece. Wherever I'm working with a business, is I always come in with what I call the IAP, the inventory action plan. And it's looking, and this will come to now, is looking at three things. Is I look at what percentage, comes back to KPIs, what percentage of your procurement of materials is free text for MRO? It's a very important indicator because a lot of companies around this 40 to 60% of my spend is free text. Well, you'll never optimize your reorder points if you're bypassing your warehouse and buying stuff as free text. So that's one of my core KPIs that we'll talk about as well, is you need to get a grasp on your free text, especially for your M's and R's of your MRO. The second piece is optimizing your moving materials. Is you have a process, a tool, or a spreadsheet to calculate reorder points and reorder quantities, or min maxes. I'll talk about that too, because I prefer ROP, reorder points and reorder quantities, to min max for good reason, because it's focusing on the min is the most critical number. Everything else that is about ordering cost. And the third piece of the IAP is your slob reviews. You're always going to have this long tail. And this comes back to Tracy and the engineering teams. Is you guys need to have, part of your job is to help the business review slow moving materials. And the first thing is it fit for purpose? 2, is it in a BOM? If it's not in a BOM, stop. Because then a lot of times the material's been sitting there so long, nobody has any idea why it's in the warehouse. Nobody will ever come looking for it. They'll either recatalog it or go buy a new one. So that slob process should be a monthly program of reviewing, you know, your top 50 by value. And then if you did that every month, within a year, you will have gone through your most expensive slow moving materials and reclass them. How many people here have a slob review process? I'm really keen to understand that, because everybody's got slob, which is slow and obsolete, slow and potentially obsolete. Who has a process here to manage those materials?
Yeah, we do. So the materials management people will send out a list, and the reliability teams are required to review it and give feedback, whether it's because some of our slow moving items are critical spares that you might use once in 10 years, but trust me, we have had, you know, last year a shaft that had sat on the shelf for 10 years was required, otherwise the mill stopped.
And that happens so often, Trace, and that's why during that process, when you go through it, you're reviewing it with engineering and reliability to say, yes, no, we still need this. Great, because then you classify it, and ideally you have a process to capture that information and retain it, because next year it'll probably come back up in the slob report because it still hasn't moved, but then you have it and you can move on quickly. It says, nope, that's still required. The equipment's still here. It's in that BOM. It's on with this supplier, and move on. Or if it's not critical, then you don't need that much of that much information. But also preservation. I'm finding this more and more of a problem, where materials are going into a warehouse and people just assume they're going to be fit for purpose when they're needed, especially long-term spares. And utilities have long-term spares. So that's probably my next question is, 1, are you doing your slob reviews? But 2, do you have any preservation activities? And you can start with your most critical, like just start with motors. You know, you can talk to your supplier, WEG or ABB or whoever it is, and say, hey, what would you do to maintain this if it was in a warehouse for long term? It's, you know, plugging them in, it's turning the shafts, or, you know, whatever it is in terms of the size of the motor, what do you need to do? And then that can become standard work orders. If you're using SAP, that can be a PMO4 work order, or something that the warehouse can do. Sometimes you need maintenance to come in and maintain them. So is anybody doing any preservation activities?
Tim, I can speak from the E&I side because I'm a E&I planner.
Yep.
So we got some big HV motors, which is kind of we got anti-condensation heater hooked up to them. So we keep them powered on, but we do routine checks on them rather than we have PMO for. We do the routine work orders just to inspect those in in preservation status, like to ensure the readings are good, whether anti-condensation heater is working okay, whether the winding resistance is good. So we got in-house checks. Also, we got outside contractors to come and check the motors once in a while. So it's more kind of routine checks. We got like 6 monthly, 3 monthly checks and inspections, and 1 yearly winding resistance checks and etc.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Especially in your area where materials need to be in a condition controlled environment, generally meaning air conditioned, and vibration free. And that's one that comes up a lot. When I worked in the cement industry a long time ago, the warehouse concrete pad was on the same pad as kiln. And the vibration was significant. I mean, you wouldn't feel it as a person walking along, but was significant. And it was destroying all the bearings in the warehouse within 12 months. And we were wondering why we were getting all this infancy failure. And they found that it was through the small vibrations destroying our bearings. And so we had to, this company is a big global company. They mandated that all the bearings had to be on a separate concrete pad with dampeners and air conditioned. And I traveled around the world with this company. I was in Vietnam near the Cambodian border, and you can imagine I'm in a very damp environment, but there's a concrete pad the size of about a king size bed with a door and an air conditioner stuck on the side and had dampeners to solve that problem. So, they identified that cost them a lot of money and they solved that problem. Cool. Anybody else have any examples they want to share or have any questions?
Yeah, I have seen similar case like when I used to work as a field service engineer. A cement mill motor was sitting next to the operating fan or the motor, and it was transmitting all the vibrations into the world towards to that motor, and they had issues with that one. Eventually, they ended up replacing the motor with the new one, which was sitting nearby. And when I checked the new motor, it was giving all fault signals for the rolling element bearings. And I told them that, okay, something happened to your outer race, indentation is happened. So they said it's just new motor. So everything presumed to be new and shiny inside, which was not the case because all the vibration was transmitting towards to that one. And considering the load of the rotor itself and having those minor vibrations, they can deform very easy those components. So yeah, storage and location for those space that definitely plays a heaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why I always start with the critical materials, because there should be few. When I was working with one of your competitors from Orca, we did an analysis on all their critical materials, and I remember that this one plant in Brisbane, they had 2,654 critical materials. Straight away, I know they don't have that many. It was a very old plant, and we went back to engineering to the senior engineers and said, guys, you need to review these because you don't, if you have this many, you've got a problem with your plant. And they agreed there was too much emotion. It's usually the problem with criticality. If you do not have a process or a tool, it becomes an emotional decision, and wrapping emotion into any decision is a problem. And so if you remove the emotion, because if I'm a fitter responsible for this piece of plant, well, I'm going to obviously elevate everything in my area as more and more critical because I want it stocked in the warehouse. I do the same thing as if I was a fitter. So you need a process to remove the emotion. At BHP, I created a calculator sounds like Orca did, and it's designed to remove the emotion. I focused on three things. What was the impact of the failure if it failed in operation? 2, what was the frequency of failure that I experienced in the past or we are expecting in the future? And 3, what was the lead time? Those were the three main questions, but we wrap a little bit more around that usually. But that was just to help to get rid of emotion. And that really helped because we went from that 2,600 down to 500, which was still too high. And then they were going through a more detailed process of that final 500 to cut it down, because this one plant had 737 jet engines that ran compression for the entire plant. And if that material went down, the plant was down. I mean, you couldn't get more important than that. So we had 3 jet engines. We had 1 in operation, and 2 in the warehouse. And we would run the critical down at so many hours. You just turn it down, take it out, put the next one in, run it up for 6 months before we would repair the one we just took out, because we knew it worked. And then we still had a third as a truly critical spare. So that was where you were never, ever, ever out of stock. That's expensive and cannot always be done, but it also depends on the risk to the business and what process you have to manage and maintain those pieces of equipment. Okay, back to KPIs. So I'm gonna babble. Let me get into the KPIs. Okay, page 7. I want to talk about KPIs because this drives a lot. Okay, so the KPIs I mentioned before, there's a handful that I look at very closely. I don't know if I have them all listed here, but let's see. I'll go through the main ones that I look at. One was the planned demand percentage, because this is telling me what is driving my supply chain. Very, very important. 2, as I mentioned, was the free text. So this is looking at, well, how are maintenance procuring materials? They're either asking it from stock or we have to go buy it. And if they're buying it, are they using a material number or are they not? Important. Those are the 2 demand sides. So based on those pillars, I've got 2 per pillar. So those are the 2 for the demand signal. Then I have 2 in the warehouse. These are KPIs. So these are very high level. There's lots of metrics underneath this, but the KPIs was stock accuracy. I can't stress enough how important stock accuracy is, because every ERP system 100% depends on your stock accuracy. If your warehouse is not in control of your materials, how can your maintenance team trust or work based on the information it's getting from availability checks and things like that? So stock take, stock accuracy, control within the warehouse is absolutely critical. Probably one of the most important. The next is much more of is also in the center pillar, is stock turns. So that's very much a financial value. How fast is your inventory moving based on value? But at least it's a good idea, and it feeds off of that free text, because free text bypasses, because that inventory never hits your warehouse from a value perspective. So stock turns and stock accuracy. And then in the last pillar in the supply, I'm looking at PO automation. Now, I do that for a reason, because it helps me define what is the maturity of the purchasing process. If you're not automating, that tells me a lot straight away. And I look at, okay, why are you not automating? And I find a lot of companies over here in North America do not automate. They just throw people at it and were never showed how to automate a PO through SAP or whatever. So they just don't. And it's as simple as that. I say, well, I can probably turn this on for you by the end of the week, and happy days. So I do PO automation just as a level of maturity. So if you have very low levels of PO automation, then measure it, because it'll get attention. What do I need to automate? Because the cost, if you don't know what your cost is, assume an automated PO that works perfectly is $10, and a manual one is $100. If you don't touch it, the costs go up significantly from there. The last one is obviously default. We need to measure the performance of our suppliers into the business. And there's a lot of contention, a lot of arguments around default and how it's measured, but I don't care. Just agree on something and measure it, because suppliers, and in our MRO world, they don't care about your delivery date on your PO. They're going to deliver it. As soon as you give a PO, they're going to do their best to get it to you as fast as you can. In most cases, there are some business that says, well, you asked for the 15th and I'll deliver it by the 15th. And that's an important understanding with your suppliers is, well, I need you to deliver as quick as you can so I can bring that down. And I've had several arguments with the procurement team around their performance. What they tell me is always about the cost. How much does that product cost? How much that product costs? And I say, that's great. I hear you, but I don't care as a warehouse person because I don't care what the inventory value is. My job is just control it and make sure it's moving. Because the next thing I say is, well, do you know what the lead time is? And they go, no, we don't ask that. We just usually default it to 10 days. And straight away, I've had several arguments around this. Is tell them that it's just as important to understand the lead time, because if this material is coming by to order from Germany on a lead time of 90 days versus I can get it from the local shop in 5, makes a very big difference to working capital and risk and performance. And so once I teach them that, I says, guys, it turns into a metric in what I do. It says the average of all our materials lead time is 18 days. Your job is to reduce that. And I said, well, how do we do that? I said, that's easy. Look at the longest lead time materials that we're ordering, potentially stock, and get that stocked closer to us without us buying it. We did this with a company called DNOW here in the States, which is kind of like a Blackwoods in Australia. And I provided them their performance, and they about fell out of their chair because they said they've never seen anybody give them the performance from the company. And they turned around and says, this is fantastic. What do you want? And we'll put it in stock for you. This was up in Montana in the oil and gas industry. And so that was a win-win-win because we gave them their performance, which they loved. They wanted feedback. 2, they said, we'll stock it for you. So the average lead time on those materials went from 18 down to less than 3 days. So SAP said, you don't even need to stock these anymore. So not only did we put them on contract, reduce the lead time, and they were automated and non-stocked materials. So it was a flat out win just by focusing on that lead time, because it changes the entire conversation. I want to stop there. Does anybody within your procurement team, or do you guys push a focus on lead times within your business? If you do, tell everybody how you do it. I'm going to start picking on people. Let me go through the list. What do you think, Ian? How about Carly? Carly Shelton. Where are you from, Carly? Okay, maybe
Sorry,
Carly's
no, I was trying to work out how to unmute. Sorry. I knew you were going to pick on me.
Well, it was either you or iPhone, but I didn't know iPhone's name, so I said I'll go with you.
Well, I'm hoping iPhone is actually my boss, but so you can feel free to ask him. It is.
It actually is.
Oh, that's funny. That worked out well.
Can you pick on him because he'll answer better than me?
Okay. iPhone.
Well,
That's
I'm Matt from Brisbane. I work for a company called Textile Air. So we're a cargo airline.
Oh, okay.
So I guess as an overall vendor performance lead time, we currently don't track lead time, but I guess at an individual demand level, we do, because obviously with aircraft, there's different criticalities for spares. You know, if it's grounded,
Yeah.
clearly we need something with a lead time that is, you know, hours rather than days. If it's something that's quite routine or planned, we obviously lead time probably isn't quite as important as price or condition of parts. So, but yeah, so I guess overall, no, we currently don't. It's something we're working with our software developer to look at, but no, currently no.
Okay. So thanks for that, guys. That's interesting because I'm in this utility here in the States, and it was interesting because utilities, it's if you've ever worked with utility, they don't care about cost because risk is too high. If they have a major weather event like Sydney is having now, they can't afford not to have certain materials like transformers or poles and wires, some of the things that they have to have on. So they don't care about stock turns or value. It's about the risk side, but they do care about when they can get something. So this utility here, which is a water utility on the East Coast, I reviewed their data, and they don't have a lot of materials. They only have about 7,000 materials, and they do the water and sewage for the Connecticut area. And I noticed that 3/4 of their materials had no lead time at all because they were never showed why to put it in there, where it went, and what it did. So, but they asked me, said, Tim, why do we get when MRP runs, which they run manually, the requisition would come with the delivery date of tomorrow. I know we can't get it tomorrow. And I showed him, I knew what it was straight away. And I showed him, this is your lead time. And it was interesting because this is an old utility, very unionized. I think the average age was probably in the 50s. Everything is in everybody's heads. And we hear that a lot in Australia as well. And so this was some of the stuff I'm going to work with them on, is like, we got to get it out of your head and into the system. And I showed them their demonstrated, which was a dramatic difference. And that started changing their stocking quantities, because they would stock like 12 months of inventory because of this risk. So it's an interesting one. So I'd encourage you just to have a conversation with your procurement teams and to understand, if you're running MRP and it's a non-stock environment, lead times become even more important, because if you need to buy something to order, typically maintenance or engineering want to know, well, when can I have it? And again, that should all be built into your ERP environment. Okay. Anybody else want to share on their KPIs? Any KPIs that you think that we're missing, or that you want to share that you think are very important? Because KPIs are, again, that drive the shape around your supply chain. They should drive that direction and frequency. Okay, who am I going to pick on? I need to hear KPIs.
Tim,
How about?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, again, I'm back again. So we
898991.
Yeah, so we do have a specific KPIs on our repairables. Because most of the time what happens is, like, we have a lot of damaged stuff sitting in our storage locations, and it never gets repaired or refurbished. And also there are cases where the stock levels are wrong, like when there are repairables of high value which is meant to be in stock, it shows one in stock, and when you go see them, there's none there. So kind of, so we kind of really trace back or look on our repairable stocks and see, because it's usually high risk, high value items what we keep as repairable. So kind of do have a KPI specifically on that. But I'm not that expert on the refurbishment work orders. So, but because it's process run by my boss, but but we do run a.
Well, see, that goes right back to that stock accuracy. I find this all, because I used to run a lot of warehouses and the inventory teams. This is why it's so important, because if the warehouse isn't in control, that's the whole point of a stock take. It's a gap analysis. I'm counting to see, am I in control or am I not in control? And nobody likes to do it. Counting sucks, to be honest with you, but it's a must do. You cannot not count. You have to count, because this is what happens if you don't have high quality stock accuracy, high levels of stock accuracy, and you're a maintenance or engineering person. What are you going to do? I said, I know the warehouse is crap. So what are you going to do? You're going to free text, or you're going to go around them because they're not performing. It's fundamental that the warehouse, it's like breathing. They have to be in control. Like we ran, I always ran cycle counting, and we count every day, or at least if you're 24/7 operations, we count it on the weekends. Critical materials every single month, and that was the priority. And as you mentioned, repairables, rebuildables, rotables, they're typically some of your most expensive and critical materials, definitely in mining. So if at a minimum, if your warehouse does not have a good stock taking process, ask them, work with them, and ask them why. Do the 5 whys on it and say, can you at least count the critical materials every month? We need to know they're here and they can rely on it. Because like in SAP, when you run an availability check, it's looking at it looks at your inventory. If you don't have inventories, it looks for a purchase order. If there's no purchase order, it goes to lead time. So again, lead times are important. Purchase order delivery dates are important, which is built on your lead time, and then your stock on hand. I mean, those are foundational. These are things that if you're not doing them, you need to start. In terms of a takeaway, KPIs. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Tim, just when you said lead time, and probably I don't know whether the things has been changed after the COVID stuff. Like, during COVID, the lead times were top of the roof, like what we had like 10 days when
Yeah.
we were like 30 days, 40 days. So we had a bit of hustle. So things are settling back normally now. But yeah, but still we had to do a bit of audit during those time to make sure the audit times were, sorry, lead times were updated on SAP to make sure we get the stuff in hand free quickly rather than, we get into the surprises like 10 days went to
Yeah.
60 days and 90 days.
Yep.
No.
Well, and this is the supply chain has been bashed over the last few years with the evergreen ship getting stuck in the canal and COVID, and now we've got tariffs terrorizing the world. How do you manage your lead times? Do you put your head in the sand and just hope for the best, or do you have a process to manage lead times? Because it dictates inventory, it dictates a lot of things. I mean, so I'm really keen to see who has a process to manage. Every time you do a receipt, your lead time potentially changes. Because
Yeah.
I've got a tool and it manages your delivered performance. Every time you do a receipt, well, you get a performance update on you. It's definitely backwards looking. And if you have a contract where they're telling you it's 14 days or 90 days, whatever, but how well are they performing to that? That needs to be a managed process. So who does that?
So we have a
Which
we have a partially like a control in our system to work with some of the vendors we are working right now.
Yep.
The suppliers, some of very kind to us. They are maintaining their warehouses just to keep an eye on to the utilization of their space on our site. So they are helping us
Okay.
in that regard to maintaining their storages to minimize the lead time. Still, it's a challenge. I won't say like it's
Mhm.
100% managed, but yeah, in some areas we did that exercise and it paid pretty well. It's actually like it works in both way. Whoever doing the business, they definitely want to seek a long-term relationship. So that actually plays a
Yep.
part to work with our suppliers, vendors, and getting
Okay,
them
good.
on the track. Yep.
Well, and that's obviously the point of a default metric to see if the lead time that they've told you or your material master data, are they performing to that? If they're on a contract, they should definitely be performing to the contract, and they need to know when they're not performing. I see this happen all the time is people just don't go back to suppliers and give them feedback on how they're performing. And that turns into MRP exception messages and expediting, which means you're adding cost because your supplier isn't performing and you're not telling them. And so they don't care whether their lead time changes. They run out of stock. I've seen lead time for Komatsu go from 9 days up to 90 because, oh, we just had a big flush. We're out of stock. Sorry, you're just gonna have to wait. That's not good enough in a lot of cases. And working closely, put things on contract and hold them to account for that in many different ways and through your T's and C's. Any other feedback? Anybody else? Orica is getting the lion's share. I'm keen to
I
hear from
think,
somebody else.
yeah, Flavio speaking here.
Hey, Flavio.
I had a question before from your previous topic on KPIs.
Yep.
So obviously we do have some of these KPIs that are not, but
Oh, yeah.
what we're struggling here is with stock on hand and what good looks like in stock on hand. So we don't have this figure and probably a science to calculate. Obviously, you
Yep.
mentioned about critical spare parts, and probably this is are all critical spare parts should be on stock, but we don't know what good looks like. We have a massive inventory on spare parts,
Yep.
and probably because we've been poorly managing over the last 10, 20 years. And that's why
Yeah.
we're trying to understand what good looks like as an SOH. And so that's why my question, how do you navigate that? How do you establish this?
Okay, good. That's a really good question, Flavio, especially in the FMCG industry where managing that cost is probably more important than it is for like mining and definitely for utilities. So this is where your stock turns come in, because if your stock turns is less than 1, you have too much inventory, period. So understanding your stock turns, and this is stuff that you can Google or use AI tools will tell you this all day, even how to calculate a reorder point. It's not rocket science. With MRO, it is a little bit unique. My tool has some different abilities to manage it through different algorithms, but It is something that you have to recalculate reorder points because your business is constantly changing, your lead times are changing, and your demand is changing. So you need to think of your inventory as a shock absorber. Okay. It's absorbing COVID instances or weather events or whatever. It's there to say, okay, I've got you covered. I got you covered. And not all the time, sometimes you're gonna be metal on metal, and that's life, and you try to manage that. But what happens, your shock absorber becomes way, way too big, and you're never even coming close. You got way too much inventory because you don't have a process to manage the quantities. And if you leave it to maintenance or engineering to set the levels, 99% of the time it's going to be too high. And I would do the exact same thing, because if you're maintenance, I bet they have no accountability to all the cash you have tied up in your warehouses. Zero. So what are they going to do if they need 2? They're going to tell you 4. And again, I would probably do the same thing. So that's why maintenance and supply chain have got to work together. And that calculating a Reorder Point, you can Google it and find out, or you can buy a tool that will help you do this. And it's like I focus on 1, what's criticality? 2, what's lead time? Okay, now I can calculate your Reorder Point. And that's, again, the Reorder Point's about risk. Your max or your reorder quantity is all about cost. I see this upside down all the time. A lot of people have a min of 2 and a max of 4, and it's usually upside down, where the min probably should be 4 and the max should be 4, meaning when you drop below, you just order back up, because I need to hold 4. That's my risk. This max, I hate max because it's a production planning kind of legacy that's moved into MRO. It's not the right approach. Your focus should be on your reorder point. That's what's covering your risk. And that's set based on the demand during lead time plus safety stock. That's the formula. What is the demand during your lead time? If it's 90 days, how many do you think you're going to need within 90 days plus a bit of safety stock? That's your reorder point. After that, once you've set that, it says, okay, well, if they're very, very cheap, if they cost less than $1, well, you're probably going to order heaps because the PO costs so much. But if they're expensive, well, just order to get you back up to your reorder point. In many cases, in MRO, your min and max are the same level. Okay, when you drop below, you're just going right back to that number. I was in a utility with this lady she was creating the materials, and she had the min, but they were using a min max. So she was randomly setting the maxes on her own because they never told her. And she would go, oh, if it was 2, I would just add 4 and I would make it 6, for no other reason than that. It blew me away that there was such a lack of understanding. That happens a lot. That's fine. So we fixed that quite quickly, and their stocks just plummeted as they consumed the inventory down. But Flavio, that's a good one. So this is demand during lead time plus safety stock. And safety stock is rounded up by 1, but yeah, it's a good one. Anybody else have the same problem as Flavio? Especially in FMCG. Craig, where are you? Craig, are you still there?
I'm hiding. Yes, we definitely have the same problem. We're a bit unique where we can't use reorder points due to the system, but we pretty much built it around min-max being the same, unless it's fast moving. We're holding more max and just going down to our minimum to, realistically avoid the PO cost.
Yep. So do you guys, Craig and Flavio, question for both of you. Do you guys measure your stock turns across sites or globally? Okay, starting to. Good.
Not on MRO, only on finished goods, semi-finished goods. So MRO is still underdeveloped.
Okay, well, Flavio, what system are you on, Flavio?
SAP.
Oh, it's a standard metric in SAP. Are you on ECC or S/4HANA?
ECC.
Okay, well then that MCBA has a key figure. Well, there's a lot of the MC reports have it in there, but stock turns is inbuilt. You can do it. Just run it for 12 months to get you an annual stock turn. You can have that in 30 seconds. It's a great place to start, because if you're less than 1, Flavio, then you will have a lot of slob, or you're heavily overstocked, and that's a great place to start. World class is typically for MRO around 3 to 4 turns. That's world class. Best in class is between 2 and 3. Or 1 and 3, you could say, depending on the material. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Tim.
Yep, no problem. Anybody else have any questions on KPIs?
We've introduced a piece of software called Missing Link last year. That's a plug-in to SAP that does a lot of the analysis for us. And one of the as part of that project, we're moving away from min-maxes to reorder points and reorder quantities. And I think that it's giving us some data because it also then picks up whether the material is on a BOM or not. Produces a report, and you can go and see that, hey, this actually needs to be added to a BOM, or that someone's clocked something out on a work order, like a can of coffee or something like that. But you just and that, I mean, that happens.
Yeah, that does.
It has had a few. It still does need human interaction, but it certainly makes it quicker. So we've had things like the software, which is nicknamed Millie, has tried to. So there's a particular part, like it's a fin for a turbine that you need 8 of, and it tried to knock us down to 1. You obviously need to change all 8 out at the same time, otherwise have a bit of trouble. But it's certainly adding value and increasing that the turnaround time and the data analysis.
Excellent. Good to hear, Tracy, because that's my software.
You're kidding, really?
Yeah. We used to be called Missing Link, but now we're Lexan. And that's Millie is
we still call you Millie.
Millie's my baby. So
Millie is also the stray cat that hangs around the mill.
okay. We'll try not to get them confused. Okay.
No.
Anybody else have thanks, Tracy. That's thanks for that. Is there any other questions around KPIs? Because I find them what I do with those 6 KPIs, and Tracy will know them. I roll them up because when I was at BHP, the problem I had is I was talking up into the CFO, and he or she, they had no idea what MRO was or the world I was in. At the time, I had almost $500 million in inventory, and that was all about dollars. They didn't care about receipting or stock accuracy. So I built these KPIs at a high level, and I rolled them into one metric that I called supply chain effectiveness. And it was just, I weighted them evenly and they rolled up into this 1%. And I used that for business cases to say, hey, I can get my P automation up by spending X number of dollars, but that will return Y number of dollars. So it kind of put it all into dollar terms to make it black and white for business cases. So that I thought that was very important, and the senior management appreciated it because I wasn't going to them and saying, hey, my materials are V1 or PD or I wasn't talking Japanese. It was all about dollars. And usually MRO, if you're a for-profit, unless you're a utility, which usually they're not, it's all about those dollars, and always focus on risk. That's the whole purpose. Any other examples that people wanted to mention? Because it's really good to hear the stories of what you did and the impact it had, because your KPIs need to drive action. That's the point of them. You can't have 15 of them. You got to have a handful that drive direction for the year or the years to come. Anybody else? No.
iPhone back again. When I was at Qantas, we used to use a KPI that we called wing to bin, which was if we took something off an aircraft and
iPhone, it sounds like you're in an airplane because you're breaking up badly.
When would we have
Carly, can you flag them down? iPhone, we can't hear you, buddy. It's
I'll message
still
him.
going. Okay. I'd really like to hear this story.
There we go.
Okay, sorry. Thanks, mate. It's just interesting. Aviation, I kind of call that the parent of MRO, because MRO this whole concept really started in the aviation world, where you have to track everything from the point where it was supplied from how it was stocked, and also where it was installed and when it was taken out. So it's like cradle to grave management of MRO in aviation, which really kind of sets the bar in a lot of cases. Ian, should we oh, he's okay, he stopped. Okay.
Danish, are you able to mute him?
Yeah, we may have to mute.
Yeah, sorry, mate, we can't hear you. If you, we'll just mute you. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. It would be interesting to hear. And if you ever Google MRO or use AI, you'll come up with a lot of aviation examples because it's such a cradle to grave. You need to track everything, even to the point in some places the steel that was used to make the parts, and it's becomes laborious. When I was in New Zealand, Air New Zealand had to track it to that level of degree, and it added a lot of cost, but you need to know where parts are going. Sorry. So sorry, Mr. iPhone. Would love to hear back from you again when we can get a clear line. We're down to 15 minutes, and I guess in this course, here's a lot of things I talked to. Is there anything else people wanted to bring up? I've covered all the main points at this 90 minutes. It's quite a short time frame. But is there anything else anybody wanted to speak of, like, stocking strategies, is when you stock things, when you don't stock things? We talked a little bit about that around lead times, criticality, lead times and impact. I've got warehousing processes in here, the kitting. I'd love to know about warehouse processes because that's another really important piece, in returns. And master data, taxonomy. Are you cataloging to a taxonomy? How well do you actually catalog materials so that it's structured? Most people, if you don't have a tool, it's an unstructured environment. So applying a taxonomy gives it structure, and your duplicates will fall out of it. And Tracy can tell you we've got a tool in there that provides that taxonomy. Anybody have want to talk about some of them, like the master data that drives the MRO materials? Like if you're in SAP, the MRP controller fields, purchasing groups, all these material groups, all these type of things. We've got 15 minutes. We got some really shy people. I'm gonna start calling people. Here we go. I'm gonna go through the list here. Come on. Let's see. Reinhardt. Where are you, Reinhardt? Are you there? There he is.
Yes, I am. I've actually got a group sitting around here. We're wondering when we're going to get a chance to that. We've got a bit of a interesting situation. We're in the water business, running this our national park. And the contractual requirements are such that if we do not meet the water order that we get, that the penalties that are applied are quite high. So on a number of instances, we actually throw the textbook out of it and say, well, we need to cover off on our risk. So we're very conservative in our whole approach. Now we look at stock and MRO management. A lot of what we got is basically being sourced from internationally. So
yep,
it takes a while for it to arrive here. So that's also something that we've actually, I think I've made quite a number of notes around how we need to look at that from our perspective.
Yeah, exactly. That becomes a risk in itself, especially as it feels that the world's in a bit of turmoil. There's some wars raging. There's a lot of issues around, do you have multiple sources? Hopefully domestic. If not domestic, can you source from other places? And this comes back, like if you're in SAP, I don't know if you are, but having multiple sources supplied linked through an info record to your material. Some of that, give your ERP system data so that it helps reduce the risk if you do run into problems. Thanks, Reinhardt. Anybody else? Any other questions? Any other topics that are of any pain points that you want to talk about? These are some of the core things I talk about in the course in a much greater detail. But we talked about criticality, lead times, optimization. Flavio brought that up. That's not so simple, but there are basic calculations you can get if you haven't purchased a tool like Millie. that will calculate them for you. We talked about bombs. That is something, just baby steps. Start with your critical equipment, put them in a bomb, and that hopefully it'll take off from there. Draw a line in the sand. When you start cataloging today, ask maintenance, where does it go? So that you don't create any more materials that do not live in a bomb. Every material should be in a bomb that's cataloged. Whether it's stocked or not, start with stocked, but every material, M's and R's, put it in a bomb. And then start chipping away.
Sorry, I have a question. As you said, we have a couple of minutes. Like, when do you go for the strategy from managing in-house to start opening some consignment with distributors and suppliers? For what items do you see this change in a good move, or when do you do this?
Good question. So this happens a lot more in North America than I find in Australia. Is you have a lot of vendor managed inventory here. And to me, it's because of laziness and they have money. So they'll just have a supplier come in and do all the work. And that's fine. In Australia, if you're in a major city like Melbourne or Sydney, that's also a good option because your suppliers will be close to you. But again, the first question is risk. If it's a high risk component, like a critical material, I would not have that on consignment stock or vendor managed. You need to have control of those materials. You can mix it in with usually what I do, if it's critical, start with those materials. You need to own them, stock them, love them, count them, make sure they're preserved. And you also don't need, like Reinhardt was mentioning, where do you source them? That's the next thing. So start with those. So you've sourced them, and you hopefully you have multiple sources if that's an option. Sometimes it's OEM and it's not an option. Then as you come down the risk, then the cost comes more into play as lower risk. Now I want to manage cost, and that's where vendor managed and consignment stock comes into play. So I brought in consignment stock before. Consignment stock is great because you have the inventory at zero value, but typically you will pay more for it when you do consume it. So there's a bit of a trade-off. So if working capital is of a big impact on your business, and that may be an FMCG, well, then look at consignment or at least vendor managed, especially if your facilities are near populated areas where your suppliers are. So that, as I was working in the chemicals plant in center of Queensland, and clearly you could only fly in, fly out. So that's really not much of an option. Trucks came in, but there was no driving. Everybody flew, so it wasn't an option. So you do have geographic constraints. I assume, Flavia, are most of your facilities near the city centers?
Yes, they are.
Okay. So then usually what you'll find is pipes, valves, and fittings. Those are like bread and butter. Those, you look for those, go to you put those out to tender and say you want them either vendor managed, so they come in weekly or monthly, they do the counts and they fill up your bins and they just say, hey, here's what I filled up, and you pay for it. And those may not even be in inventory. They could be expensed. Versus consignment stock, you count them, and then as you consume them, then you pay your supplier for them. So it becomes a bit of a balance, because when you do vendor managed, they do all the work in most cases. If it's consignment stock, you may have to do a little bit of extra work, but it's a trade-off for not carrying that working capital, the cash.
Yeah, makes sense. We don't do the belts as yet. I think this is one of the opportunities I'm pursuing at the moment, because it's a massive inventory we hold, as you would imagine, bakeries and amount of belts we use. So definitely is now, I'm doing the shift, because before I was reliability manager, now I'm supply chain, operational excellence.
Good.
I caused my harm now and I'm trying to fix. That's
That's the best way to do it when people bounce around, whether from maintenance operation to supply chain or vice versa. That's actually really good. Belts are big ones, especially like in mining, Flavio. So I've dealt with lots of, the big conveyor belts, when you needed, in some cases, kilometers of belts, where you have to negotiate with the supplier because, rubberized materials typically only last 5 years, depending on the component. So, they need to be out of the sun in as much instance in a dark environment. So that's preservation for rubberized materials is a big deal. Like even in earth moving tires, we couldn't keep them after 5 years. We had to remove them, and they cost $120,000, $80,000 a piece. So yeah, so that comes back down to, this is the difficulty with MRO. Every group has a story. Hence why the preservation, I've started a preservation catalog of, okay, this is how you do gearboxes. Here's how you do motors. Here's, O-rings or rubberized components. Here's things to consider. I had big girth gear that was, would sit in a container and it just laid there for years. And we went to use it. It was off by 10 mil, had to be sent back. And this is hundreds of thousands of dollars. They had to send it back and remachine it and redo it because it just sat in a bad shape. They didn't, we had ended up building a platform with on stilts, but it had it leveled with engineers, set it down, and then we preserved it. And it'll probably sit there for another 15 years before they use it again. But it was the one-off effort for the long-term use. Okay, we got 5 more minutes. Anybody have any other things they wanted to bring up or talk about? That was a good one, Flavio. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. So here I talk about some preservation activities here. So that's something to consider. That's more, when you have a lot of inventory or critical. Definitely start with your criticals on preservation. And you can go online, like go into WEG's website if you've got motors, and they'll be happy to tell you what to do. You used to plug things in if you're near the ocean. That's another problem. I was looking at building a big central warehouse, and I had to build it 2.5 kilometers away from the ocean, or I would have had to deal with the salt air. Never expected that to be an issue, but that was.
Tim, just before we go, I just thought I'll share this also. Like
Yep.
in our plan, we do have a lot of gas analysis and we use a lot of calibration gases for those gas analysis, which got long lead time, but got a minimum shelf life. So kind of very tricky situation to keep them in stock. Do you have any similar scenarios where how do you manage those kind of materials or calibration gases?
Yeah, straight away, you try to push it onto the supplier to get the lead time down. It's difficult when you're like in Australia and New Zealand, where lead times are long because we don't have the volume required like you do in North America. Here, lead times are so much shorter because they've got city centers everywhere or manufacturing is local. So the first thing I do is I say, well, how much can I put in, deal with, get procurement, talk to the supplier and see if they can shorten lead times. That's number one.
Yeah.
2, the other side, because if you're in the warehouse, your job is just to hold it for maintenance. So you have to look at the two bookends, maintenance operations, getting much more detail of consumption patterns and usage and maintenance plans, and then the supply side, because you're just piggy in the middle. You're the shock absorber. But when you deal with shelf life, that's a much bigger deal.
Yeah.
Like I had to do a lot of work just on grinding discs. How many times do people use a grinding disc because they expire and then they shatter, and then that becomes a massive safety problem. I've seen a disc go into somebody's safety glasses, and luckily they didn't get hurt. So that was we spent a lot of time on a pack of 10 grinding discs and putting it when we receipt it, shelf life, and then we would monitor that from a warehouse perspective. And a lot of times we threw them away before they got used. Now that was a cheap material, but expensive gases for your making explosives and fertilizers, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Thank you.
Interesting. No problem. Okay. Anybody else? We've got 2 minutes before Ian's going to cut me off. Anybody that hasn't spoken? Oh, there's some people in here who hasn't spoken. Mel, speak up, Mel. Where are you from? Or Jack? All right, Jack, you're off mute. I can see. Where are you from?
Very quiet. Tim, quiet.
Very quiet.
Tim, very quiet.
Or yeah. I know I'm not used to having such a quiet crowd, but that's okay. Maybe it's morning or it's just wet and people are having a coffee. That's okay. All right. Well, I think if I start anything, I'm gonna bang on for too long because I'd love to talk more about master data and roles and responsibilities of being data driven. I think I'll finish with that because over here in America, they're not as much as a data driven environment as we are in Australia and New Zealand, which is interesting. It's like they're very lazy over here, which is frustrating because there's especially utilities, they don't have anybody looking after master data for maintenance or supply chain. And so that's number one priority. They have to get resources that manage these this environment because of the risk. And so it goes back to, if you're going to be in an ERP, and everybody is these days, especially if you're here, well, how are you managing the data that drives your ERP? You have to have responsibility assigned. So I'll finish with that, but everybody, thank you. Thank you. Please give me your feedback. If there's something that you wanted to hear about that you didn't, let Ian or myself know, or anybody in the mainstream team, so we can keep improving this and improve. Thanks, everybody.
Fantastic, folks. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for your thanks for all of the comments have been very, very positive. People have jumped to meetings and left. The good news is that this has been recorded and it will be added to the mainstream community portal. So if you haven't already joined, please do make sure you do that. I've put the link into the chat. So tell your friends, tell your network, tell your folks in the office that there are heaps of presentations like this, and loads and loads of content. We've got thousands of articles on there that you can have a look at. Thank you so much. I know it's getting late in the day for you in Detroit. Thanks for joining us from your trip to the US. People, thank you for being with us and for your feedback. And as Tim mentioned, if you do have any thoughts or suggestions about future subjects or anything in particular that you'd like to see, we'd love to hear.
Absolutely.
And yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. Have a great day, the rest of your day, and a wonderful weekend. And yeah, we'll see you very, very soon.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, Tim. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Tim.